Hello, my name is Chitta and I am one of Bhante's students. We realised recently that if people wanted to make donations to Bhante, it wasn't necessarily very easy. It doesn't have a fixed address and therefore a fixed donation box. So we've added a link below if anybody does feel like they want to offer some dana in any way. Obviously it's going to a wonderful cause, it's supporting the sasana and helping support the translation of all the suttas and the recitation of the suttas. So if you feel that way inclined, then please do click on the link below and support this wonderful monk. Thank you. May you be well.
Don't lean on anything. If we narrow it down, Lord Buddha's teachings, one would be, in all fairness, permitted to place the Dhamma into that nutshell, a gem of a phrase, which Lord Buddha encouraged his students to adhere to, not leaning on anything, specifically the khandhas, the five aggregates, which today's sutta will be addressing. Even though today's sutta is from the Samyutta Nikaya, but that phrase comes to mind from the Udana, where Lord Buddha says, don't lean on this or that extreme. But why? When we place our focus, when we place our everything upon something, then we will see how everything is riding on it, as the vernacular goes. The tiniest little glitch will throw us off, and the term for that is chalita or chalitan. The term don't lean on anything can also be, in the Pali, it's anissitas chalitang nati. Chalita is the agitation bit, is the trembling, is the shaking, wavering, becoming all flustered, trembling. But nissitassa would be when you are leaning on something, when you are placing your weight on something. In terms of the Vinaya rules, we have typically, the term is nisaya, which is dependency. But in that context, it would be for the newly ordained bhikkhu to be leaning on someone whom they call the upajjhaya or the preceptor or the teacher. Until the bhikkhu can develop in sila, samadhi, panya to attain release and to have jnana dassana of release. Nisaya. So it comes from the same root, nissitas. But the term here is not to lean, not to depend. Anissitas chalitang nati. We need to be reminded of this every time we're talking about exploring, learning a little bit more about the khandas, the aggregates, the five aggregates. There are rupa, sometimes called nama rupa, but rupa usually, which is the form aggregate. Then we have vedana, which are the feelings. Some people say sensation. And then you have perception or sanya or memories. And then you have sankharas, which are the habitual drives, sometimes referred to in English as formations, mental formations, etc. And then lastly, you have vijnana, which is basically consciousness, the sense awareness. But in order for you to be alive, you need to have these five. The problem is we lean on them. They become the only reference or references or reference points of living life. Hence, we grab onto them, hold on to them. That's why Lord Buddha called it panchupadana khanda, the grabbing aggregates, or the tendency to grab onto these five, which is basically the crux of the matter, why we suffer. We lean on them too much. We make them more than what they're supposed to be. We turn them into something more in relevance of tasting and understanding and processing and growing through this thing called reality. Before you sat, I was mentioning how there's a divergence point between the Putujjana and a noble disciple. Someone who has right view developed in them, and the rest of them, the rest of the population who are not, meaning they are drenched in wrong view. Well, what distinguishes the two? According to this dispensation, this sasana, the Dhamma and Vinaya of Lord Buddha's, what is the distinction between these two? When suffering happens, for example, the Putujjana will grab on to that suffering and call it one's own. That is the funnel, that is the sieve, that is the filter of reality for them. It has to go through that. And because it's so massive, it's so saturated with emotionality, that experience of pain, for that person, that becomes the truth. And what happens at that moment, even if the person had been practicing or reading or studying the Dhamma for 50 years, they drop all that and grab on to the pain as reality by holding on to it and say, why is this happening to me? Why did I fail? Why did I not get this that I wanted? What we see there also is asmimana, the conceit I am that Lord Buddha calls it. Conceit I am, me, myself, it's happening to me. There's a relationship between this and that. So long as there are these two, the Dhamma will be completely off limits for such a mind. Because the person will block their way to see. And this is the big distinction between these two fractions, if you will. The Putujjana and the noble disciple. The noble disciple, the one who has attained to right view, will say, hold on. Yes, absolutely, there's pain, but what does the Dhamma teach me about this? You see, there's a huge turning point there. It might seem very slight, hardly noticeable, very subtle, but it's powerful, because that tiny little change in focus makes all the difference in the world, because that person is on their way to arahantship. The other ones are not. The other ones are lost in samsara, so long as they don't make that shift. And no one can make that shift for the person. There's not enough books that one can read, not enough suttas that one could read and go through or memorize that would allow them to. They will perpetually remain like that quintessential spoon inside the soup, never able to taste the soup. Because it's so personal, this journey. So it takes courage, it takes humility, it takes the ability to, the fortitude to say, wait a minute. Is there a way that I can go through this pain while learning the Dhamma through it? I picked pain, for example, but it could be something else. Even pleasure could be used. But especially the neutral feeling. And this is where Vipassana can come in. To observe, the spotlight is placed, the camera is always placed on whatever is happening. That's why we need sati and sampajanya throughout the day. Using an anchor point, whether it's feeling of metta in the heart or the breath, feeling the breath at the nostrils, or feeling the body every time you touch something with the skin, touching different surfaces, or the motions of the body as you're moving from one position to the next, sitting, getting up. Sati is there before you get up, during getting up, as you reach that point where you stop. And now you need to move, walk. Before the body turns in this or that direction, sati is there, guiding the way. So the Dhamma is not there to, coming back to the theme of pain or unpleasant feeling, the Dhamma is not there to get rid of that pain, get rid of that nasty encounter that that occurred without your agreement to it. You didn't invite it even, but it happened nevertheless. It is displeasing, to say the least. But as you're going through it now, you're saying, yes, it's beyond my control to, I can't eliminate it, annihilate it, obliterate it, destroy it, but it's there. Let me not look at the Dhamma as a way to erase this away. Maybe there's a reason why I need to learn, see this and apply the Dhamma. The Dhamma is application based. It's not something to write a PhD dissertation on. The Dhamma is all application. It doesn't deal with nonsense. It's not an about affair, quote unquote. It's not an about business. It is everything that is happening to you in life. So no place in your life is immune to the Dhamma, if you will. That's another way of looking at it. And what you do with that situation, how you relate to that situation. So as we go through today's sutta, which, as I mentioned, it comes from the Samyutta Nikaya. It's a few suttas. It comes a few suttas prior to the one that we covered last week. So this one is not is 22.95. The other one was 22.100, where we did the leash, Gadulla Bhadha Sutta, the leash part 2. So this would be the 22.95. So it's again from the same group of Samyuttas or collected discourses, dedicated again to the theme of the Khandas. Or so this is Khanda Vagga again, from the Khanda Samyutta, from the Puppha Vagga, the flowers, section of flowers. And today's sutta is the Pheṇapiṇḍūpama Sutta, which I translated as a bulge of foam. Foam. So as we go through the sutta, I would very much encourage you to follow along with those themes that I shared with you just now in regards to the aggregates, in regards to looking at the aggregates through the focal lens of your own life. There might be a predominance of one or two elements from your life that stand out the most. It could be an area of your life that you're struggling with, whether it's business, health, a relationship, you name it. you can use that or those as a medium, as a gateway to find relevancy with the Dhamma. See, the Dhamma, it has to be relevant to your life, specifically to your life. It shouldn't be about someone else's life. Even one, like Lord Buddha or the Arya Savaka's lives. No, it has to be about you. You must find yourself in it. Even in something that might seem very methodical or something like structured, like the Four Noble Truths or the Noble Eightfold Path, your life is there. You just have to put the effort to look at it that way, to see it. It's there. And the real experiences we go through are simply trying to bring our attention back when we're looking away somewhere else. We just says, come, look. Especially in the case of painful experiences, when things don't go our way. So approaching it like that is very helpful. So let's begin. Sutta number 22.95, Pheṇapiṇḍūpama Sutta, from the Samyutta Nikaya, that is. Once, while the Blessed One was living close to Ayodhya on the bank of the river Ganges, he addressed the bhikkhus and said, "Bhikkhus, imagine seeing a great bulge of foam being carried down by the flow of this river Ganges. Then, someone with good eyesight would start paying attention to it, investigating and carefully probing to see what might be inside of it. Later, having scrutinized it sufficiently, that man would soon discover that despite its large size and massive appearance, the large bulge of foam was, in fact, truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in an essenceless bulge of foam, lacking a core?" If you've ever been close to the beach, especially near the bay where there's some rocks and things, or on the river, river bank, sometimes maybe it's bacterial amalgamation, or like just gets squeezed in one area. You will see this foam developing. Pinda, or usually anatapindika or pindapada. Pinda sometimes also is referred to as a morsel or a lump. In this case, because of the propensity of these bubbles to come together on the surface of the river flowing, it grows pretty massive in size. I've seen some of them, probably you have as well, where you go and touch it, or it touches some things, and but it's growing. But every time it's rubs against a rock or something, it just dissipates. Part of that just falls off, or a stronger current comes and takes it away. It disappears. But for a millisecond or a few minutes, that was there as a thing. So that is so far the beginning part of the simile in this case. And so Lord Buddha is going to give us, he's addressing the five aggregates, so he's going to give us 5 similes. So this is the first simile that we're going through. And let's see what's the connection here that Lord Buddha is making for us. In just the same manner, bhikkhus, whatever kind of matter or form, whether related to the past, future, or present, be it internal or external, gross or subtle, of an inferior or superior quality, whether far or near, the bhikkhu probes, investigates, and carefully scrutinizes, whereby he discovers that, despite its appearance, form is in fact truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in form that remains essenceless and lacking in core? Powerful image, if we take a moment to look at the first aggregate that occurs with us. Now, form usually in the mind comes and says, oh, you're talking about something that has mass has a dimension to it, has edges to it. If I touch it, if I slam myself against it, it will, there's a resistance to it. Yes, materially speaking, yes, as far as corporeality is concerned, yes, but it could also be experiences like that have to do with form. It could be a sight, like a rainbow, for example. You go ahead and try to touch it if you can reach it. Or it could be sounds. That's also part of form. That's how I approach it. Rupa. So remember, each of these aggregates can be seen through the medium of the other aggregates as well, as far as us taking them seriously or as real is concerned. So here you have a foam, a bulging. It's not just a lump, but it constantly bulges. It grows in size, often. But you go ahead and poke at it, stick your finger in it. I remember when I was a child, I used to think, like everyone, I presume, that the clouds had a density in them that in fact, if you put your hand against it, it won't go through. It's solid. I mean, come on, that's how they're able to collect all the rain. And to my surprise, when the first time I flew in an airplane, I went through the clouds. I was like, part of me was like, there's nothing. You just fly through. Like, wait a minute. This is quite deceptive. But when we look at our lives, we see the relationships, we see our relationship to form. And there's nothing. Now that I just said that, I remember an incident that happened. I was walking down the sidewalk from where we used to live. This is right after my mother had died. And I was going down the road, basically down, walking on the sidewalk to go to the bus stop so I can take the bus to go to work. And there was a woman on my left who had her back turned. She was walking, but her back was towards me. I felt, oh, that's Mom. She looked like my mother from the back. Her hair, this, that. I was like, oh. All of a sudden, my heart started beating fast. For a split second, I forgot about the fact that we buried her a few months ago, that she struggled for 3-4 years with cancer. The brain said, that's her. The mind went locked on for a millisecond. And as I said, logic was working, obviously, and it said, no, that can't be her. So as I started walking, I said, okay, I was convinced that it wasn't her without looking at her. But as I passed by her to her right, my face went to her, hoping that it might be her. And it wasn't her, of course. There was form, there was matter, there was a presence, there was a sight, information, color, light, everything was coming in. The rupa aggregate was very active, and it became solidified in the mind, in the presence of ignorance. So that's quite a poignant experience, let's say, a human being could have. But there's far less intense experiences that are very similar in nature that we take it for granted, but we go on waltzing through our lives, our daily lives, without paying attention to the importance we give to the form and the decisions we make accordingly. Decisions, especially in the context of having a relationship to this form. The logic, the rational mind can come and say, no, it can't be it. But there was a registration, something that was registered in you. There was something that happened based on the idea or thought or belief that this could be that. when it wasn't. So suddenly there's a reaction within us. We hold a position towards that. And this holding of a position against that, which, if you can recall what I was saying, as far as the conceit, I am myself here and that over there. What I want, what is not what I want happening over there. Those 2 points. So long as there are these 2 points, we're going to be on the pendulum of wrong view, going back and forth from one wrong view to the next. So this will play through and through with all of these aggregates, by the way, as you will notice as we go through each of them. Second simile. Bhikkhus, imagine that it is the rainy season, when there are massive downpours and raindrops are themselves quite heavy and seem to ceaselessly fall. Now, as a result, water bubbles keep forming and popping as they arise and burst on the surface of puddles. Then someone with good eyesight would start paying attention to these bubbles, investigating and carefully probing to see what might be inside of them. Later, having scrutinized sufficiently, that man would soon discover that, despite their large size and massive appearance, the water bubbles that keep forming and popping are in fact truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in essenceless bubbles formed by the falling raindrops? In just the same manner, bhikkhus, whatever kind of feeling, whether related to the past, future, or present, be it internal or external, gross or subtle, of an inferior or superior quality, whether far or near, the bhikkhu probes, investigates, and carefully scrutinizes, whereby he discovers that, despite the seemingly undeniable experience of them, feelings are in fact truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in feelings that remain essenceless and lacking a core? Remember the first I was saying about when I shared with you that sutta from the Udana. It was the Chatutta Nibbana Sutta from the Udana, where Lord Buddha is saying, how leaning onto something is the way to get agitated. Therefore, one needs to not be leaning on anything in order for them to experience non-agitation. If there's an enemy on the path, if you narrow it down to one single enemy, one thing that you must look at as your biggest threat, that is, I would say, agitation of the heart. The agitation, what I was referring to as chalitang, creating that trembling in the heart. Why? Because everything is dependent on that. Wisdom cannot take place if it's present. Samadhi cannot take place if there is that. Full release cannot take place if it's there. This thing called shakeability. That's why the Dhamma, or the attainment of Dhamma, the attainment of Nibbana specifically, is called akuppacetu vimutti. Another way of saying the unshakability of the liberated mind, of the liberated, released heart. So when we are looking, however, at feelings or sensations, if you will, what happens then is, because of this sense of identification with whatever is happening, Feelings become the very conduit of the experiencing of the colors of life, if you will. People love to have a passionate life, having a passionate position towards life, fighting with situations. All these indicate clearly the presence of agitation, however. That's one of the reasons why when we meditate, we need to make sure there isn't that propensity or the occasions or the possibilities or the situations that might give rise to further agitation. Our objective is to eliminate agitation. If there's agitation, samadhi is so far away. And here Lord Buddha is giving us, in order to help us to get to that state, he's giving us a beautiful image. A bubble that's full of air, nothing else. In fact, there was a bhikkhu one day I believe it was in Savatthi. He was in his kuti meditating, but he was facing some issues with his meditation, and some Dhammic questions came up, and they were constantly agitating him. He was feeling that he needed to get an actual response to one of his questions, which he felt was crucial, was absolutely, pivotal in its importance in relieving him of or from dukkha and ignorance once and for all. So he musters up the courage and gets out of his kuti and walks towards Lord Buddha's kuti. But before he went up the steps to walk towards Lord Buddha's kuti, he saw how it was the monsoon season. It was raining heavily. So he stood there under one of the eaves, I guess, one of the shingles, I think it's called. And he saw how the rain was pouring. He looked at the raindrops coming down heavily. For a moment, he dropped his agitation and nervousness, maybe anxiety, because it's not an easy thing when you're, even if you're very, close to the teacher, when you have a question, there's all these other questions that are happening in your mind, whether I should ask, I should not ask, is it appropriate, what is the teacher going to think about me and my level of attainment? So am I, all these things were going on in his mind. But then he dropped that for a moment, and he was just looking at, because he's practicing sati and sampajanya. You don't practice vipassana on a retreat, You practice it all your life. It's not a sometime job. And he's looking at the raindrops heavily. And he looks down, further down, and he sees these puddles. He sees specifically these raindrops that are turning into bubbles. Poof, bursting, poof, bursting, growing and bursting. And he gets his answer. And along with it, arahantship. There's no question to be asked. He says, why am I going to go and bother the old man? And turns around and goes back to his kuti. Perfectly awakened. Done. He did what had to be done. We cannot minimize the importance of sati. We cannot minimize the importance of sampajanya, which is full alertness, full awareness. You're not missing an opportunity anywhere. Because we are feeling beings, feelings dominate our lives. And we're going to see in a minute how Lord Buddha also expresses gives very beautiful images of the role that sanya and the other two have, of the khandhas, in their important, very heavy role that they play on stagnating us in this realm of feelings and emotionality, where we feel there is the undeniable evidence that this is concrete, whatever's happening to me. So the image of a bubble is not even being considered. Well, that's why we need to go over these suttas and bring in these similes into our lives so we can see that we're making a big deal over nothing. It's just a bubble. And growing the wisdom and the sight to be able to see it, like the view, having the right view to see it for what it is. Because that feeling will change. That feeling that is unbearable, shall we say, at this moment. And then somebody else walks in, somebody that's complete opposite of that. A situation is presented suddenly to us that is completely opposite. And suddenly, the feeling that was so intense, that was so unbearable, is gone. Well, wait a minute, what happened there? Why did it go away? Where did it go away? So all these things need to be looked at with care and attention. So, because they're all passing, they're all anicca. A bubble is a perfect example of anicca. So let's see what Lord Buddha says for sanya. Bhikkhus, imagine that it is one of those last intense days of the hot summer season, at noon, when the sun is at its apex, and there appears in the distance a shimmering mirage. Then someone with good eyesight would start paying attention to that shimmering mirage as he starts investigating and carefully probing it to see what might be causing it or what was inside of it. Later, having scrutinized sufficiently, that man would soon discover that despite its promising and inviting appearance, the mirage is in fact truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in an essenceless mirage formed by that heat? Mirage is the image that Lord Buddha is giving here for the importance that we give to sannyas, the perceptions. You can think of sannyas as the lenses on your glasses, on your spectacles, or on the camera with which you look at the world. The very window glass that allows you to look at and see the world outside. So if it is smudged, then whatever you look at or you're looking at is definitely going to be affected by that lens, by those glasses, by that window. So what we need to do is to be able to look at these various mirages that we set for ourselves inside the room or the world that we're living in. So what does that mean? We surround ourselves with shimmering mirages in our lives, in our world. So you can think of them as the pictures or the photos in an album. Sannyas are like that. So they're trying to anchor us in memories, in experiences, meaning those memories that are being or trying to remind us of previous experiences, moments of significance. But here is where we come back to this idea of myself, me, my life, atta, specifically the concept or the corruption of the mind when it comes to taking something that is non-substantial and seeing it as a substantial thing, for which Lord Buddha taught us anatta versus atta. So here is where we need to really be very cautious of the role of sannyas, because we live in a world where everything is revolved around the sannyas, including especially our own lives. So imagine your life is just a photo album that's constantly, you're going through your photo album. When you wake up, that's what you're doing. What were my experiences from yesterday? Oh, photo album. Oh yes, this happened, that. So we are very much drenched in shimmering mirages. But that's what we also call our personality. This is who I am. And if something is happening to me, I need to, attach a memory to that memory. In other words, associating it with a certain incident in order for us to validate my behavior now. And that's where we get our narratives, our stories, our worldview, in fact. So the Dhamma comes in and says, no, there's this thing called sila, there's this thing called samadhi, and there's this thing called panya. And they are the exposers of these mirages that we have patched all our walls of, with. Walls I'm using here as a metaphor for one's own life. Remember the album with memories, photos? So as we meditate, we need to relinquish these one after another. Sometimes entire albums have to go into the trash can. So as you're meditating, you're exposing the fact that the mirage is simply non-existent. It just appears to be a certain thing when it's not. In Bhante Nyanananda mentions it from the Sanskrit. He says, Mrigra Trishnika. Mrigra or Miga in Pali is a deer. So Trishna, it's the same for Tanha. So the thirst of the deer, who's always leaning on that extra experience out there, because the deer is thirsty in the summer heat. It looks for that, it looks like a pond or a river or a lake or something, a water, body of water. Let me go to it. And it goes and goes, you never reach it. So sannyas are unreachable mirages. But because we want to hide our disappointments of having realized that this thing is unreachable, we set ourselves what looks like a reachable mirage. And another one, and another one. Every single millisecond, we're coming up with new sannyas. But they are just mirages, nothing more. So going on to the fourth. So I don't know if I mentioned that. So actually this is a portion of the third simile. In just the same manner, bhikkhus, whatever kind of perception or memory, whether related to the past, future, or present, be it internal or external, gross or subtle, of an inferior or superior quality, whether far or near, the bhikkhu probes, investigates, and carefully scrutinizes, whereby he discovers that despite the seemingly undeniable experience of it, perception or memory is, in fact, truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in perceptions or memories that remain essenceless and lacking a core? So again and again, we are coming across these standards when Lord Buddha is saying whether it's gross or subtle, internal or external, having to do with the present, past, or future. What this is basically going over these are 11-fold. It's a formula that Lord Buddha uses. He calls it the 11-fold analysis of the groups. So you remember group as in Pancha Upadana Khandha, the 5 aggregates of grabbing. So he's using it not just in this sutta, but in many, many other suttas, this 11-fold analysis, form of analysis. So here we saw it being referred to in reference to Rupa, Vedana, and just now with Sanyas. So again, the formula goes with past, future, and present, internal, external, gross or subtle, inferior, superior, far or near. So this makes it pretty much like a very well-constructed legal contract. Think of it, with no loopholes left in it, where not even the best of attorneys or lawyers will find a loophole, say, well, yes, in this case, sanya can be other than what Lord Buddha is saying. There's none left because he addressed it in this 11-fold analysis. So whether the sanya has to do with something gross, big, something that's recognizable, or something very subtle, something that has to do with something that's happening now, vis-a-vis the 3 time periods, past, present, future, or something that has to do with close or far. Doesn't matter, Lord Buddha says. It's very much the same. It's sanya, period, through and through. It cannot be otherwise. So, and remember, Lord Buddha is using that 11-fold analysis with all of the 5 aggregates. So this is a way for us to investigate. So there is not a safe house. There isn't a special place where an experience, whether it's rupa, vedana, sanya, sankhara, vijnana, doesn't matter, whichever aggregate it is, they all are subject to these protocols, which is the 11 forms of analysis that indicate the lack of any substantiality within them, the lack of any fixedness in them, permanency in them. None of them are. Hence, we go ahead and want to grab on to these 5 aggregates. Whether we're sick, or especially when we are dying, at that moment, we're grabbing on to the 5 for dear life, as they say. So, number 4, bhikkhus, imagine there was a man who needed some heartwood, and thus was looking for the solid heartwood of a tree. As he grabs his axe and heads to the forest to obtain some heartwood, that's the toughest part of and the most valuable part of a tree. It's the most important or solid part of the trunk. On the way, he comes across a young plantain or banana tree that is neither crooked nor possessing any knots or blemishes on it. So he cuts it down at its base and chops off its head as well. So he ends up with a trunk, what looks like a tree trunk, and proceeds to removing the layers on its trunk. But in doing so, he discovers that despite removing its many coils, he could find neither a softwood nor sapwood, let alone any heartwood in it. Those are far softer, so you can't do much with them, even on a normal tree. The sapwood is not something that people use to build something that is supposed to last longer or hold a lot of weight. Heartwood is used for that, and only the heartwood of certain trees are, admired for their, quality in that. But here, there's not even those two, softwood and sapwood, let alone a heartwood. Then someone with good eyesight would start paying attention to that uncoiled plantain So because the man removed it layer by layer, thinking, okay, I'm going to get to the heartwood. There's nothing, and reached the end of the other side of the trunk of the banana tree, while he investigates and carefully probes it to see what is inside of it. Later, having scrutinized sufficiently, that man would soon discover that despite its appearance, the plantain or banana tree is in fact truly empty, hollow and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in an essenceless plantain or banana tree? It's very much like if you cut a plantain tree cross, and then you cut an onion cross, they're very similar. The cut through or the cross, of an onion, you will see it being very like circle, 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 circle. But in the case of a plantain or a banana tree, those circles more have a more of a spirally. They go into each other, but nevertheless they're just layers, coils upon coils upon coils. So you keep removing it, and what you'll have is void. Nothing that you can basically build anything with. In just the same manner, bhikkhus, whatever kind of habitual drives one may encounter whatsoever, whether related to the past, future, or present, be they internal or external, gross or subtle, of an inferior or superior quality, whether far or near, the bhikkhu probes, investigates, and carefully scrutinizes, as he discovers that despite their seemingly undeniable experience, those habitual drives are, in effect, truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of substance. After all, what else could be found in habitual drives that remain essenceless and lacking a core? So, again, we get a beautiful image here, a simile that just goes to the nature of sankharas. Remember, habitual drives here are the translation that I used for sankharas. So many times I've spoken to students and especially those who've come from practicing other methods, where they've heard about sankharas, or they read upon it, or been taught what sankharas are according to those methods of thought. And I'm surprised to hear them describe sankharas as things that are solid, that one has to destroy them, obliterate them. Things that have dimensions to them, or substantiality, in other words, atta, which defeats the whole teaching of Lord Buddha. It just goes against it. That's what the Brahmins, that's what the Jains are doing. Sankharas are simply energy, basically, that have been accumulated, just like the foam, the bulging foam, just like the bubbles of the water. They're just the same. It's just piled up energy, but when you go ahead looking at it, it's empty. It's like the mirage. So one needs to understand, however, okay, why am I doing this? Well, because I do this all the time. When I am facing these types of circumstances, this is how my reaction is, okay? So people will go ahead and look at that as a trait. And even though sometimes psychologically or rationally they might say, yes, traits can be changed. I can develop new traits, yes, but go ahead and see that if they can actually overcome that and get rid of that trait. Usually if they do, it's with a lot of kicking and screaming, and many, many years have to pass, if anything will happen in that regard, but usually not. So we're always developing these traits, and we're looking at them as things that are solid. And Lord Buddha is saying, no, they're simply what have taken place as a result of your intentionally committed actions and your methods of thinking, whatever you think about constantly. whatever you're anticipating constantly. So those become your traits. But if you go poking at it and looking at it to see what's inside, it's like that plantain tree. So this requires us to not be so fatalistic in our approach. While we're looking at the aggregates, specifically the sankharas, which happen to me to be, from what I've seen in people's behaviors or attitude towards sankharas, is that it is the hardest to understand. Everybody has their own opinions because Lord Buddha used sankhara in different contexts in different ways. So what can I do? What is in my power to do? Look at it as empty. And this is another reason why Lord Buddha said in the later years of the sasana, before it dies, the teachings of Lord Buddha, before they die, the bhikkhus, the teachers, the practitioners would have already walked away from the principle of emptiness, voidness. This, not the philosophical thing that we see in Mahayana and Vajrayana. That's not it. But what Lord Buddha taught about the essence, the higher teachings, he calls it sunyata. What sunyata? About what? Well, to see this, that it is empty like a plantain, like a water bubble, like a mirage, like a foam, bulge of foam. Can I look at the aggregates as empty? That is a distinguishing factor. That's a distinction, huge distinction between a Puthujjana and a noble disciple. And then we get to the fifth simile. Bhikkhus, imagine there was a magician or his best apprentice performing some magical trick in broad daylight in the middle of the road for all to see. Then someone with good eyesight would start paying attention to that magical trick as he investigates and carefully probes it to see what the magician is truly doing without being mesmerized by his deceptive movements or gestures. Sleight of hand, you know. Later, having scrutinized it sufficiently, that man would soon discover that despite its appearance, the magical trick is in fact truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in an essenceless and deceptive magic trick? In just the same manner, bhikkhus, whatever kind of consciousness one may experience whatsoever, whether related to the past, future, or present, be they internal or external, gross or subtle, of an inferior or superior quality, whether far or near, the bhikkhu probes, investigates, and carefully scrutinizes, as he discovers how, despite its seemingly undeniable experience, that consciousness is in fact truly empty, hollow, and utterly void of any substance. After all, what else could be found in consciousness that remains essenceless and lacking a core? Remember, consciousness in this, using the 11-fold formula as well, when Lord Buddha says internal or external, it could be happening within, or it could be something that's produced from the outside, such as a thought that you're having. Okay, that's the object, the idea. And then the mind that is able to see, mano. So then it becomes the mind, the idea, or the thought. All of a sudden we have mano vijnana in this case. So that is, you can think of it as internally generated. How about an externally generated one? You could be walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a loud noise. The noise is the object. The ear is the organ. And now you have ear consciousness all of a sudden. That you can look at as an external situation. So now having thus seen and witnessed, so this is where Lord Buddha is wrapping things up. Now, having thus seen and witnessed the truth of this, the noble disciple becomes disenchanted, with and towards form. He becomes disenchanted with and towards feelings. Similarly, he becomes disenchanted with and towards perceptions and memories of all kinds. Similarly, he becomes disenchanted with and towards habitual drives. And he becomes disenchanted with and towards consciousness, as he loses any interest in all of them, while desiring to be free from them entirely. Disenchantment is not something that's, yeah, I'm just disenchanted. It's something that's very, like being in the passenger seat type of a thing. No, it's very intense. Nibbida. It, in fact, brings up a sense of feeling utter disgust, tired of something. Even in some ways, you can say even like there's a slight presence of contempt in a good way in this case, because you're tired of worshiping the aggregates, making them into this thing that you've made all throughout your existences. So here we have that sentiment arising in you, and you can't run away from it so long as you're in a body. The body is going to send in signals all the time. When you see, especially after you've gone deep in meditation, when you see how the mind is constantly producing new ideas, they're going through. It's like, are you serious? Where did that thought come from? Who invited you? And then you see that you're always doing like shadow boxing, always trying to respond like to this serve, like on a tennis court. There's this, this opponent that's always sending these balls at you, and you have to respond. It's like, then you see, no, I'm just going to go ahead and get out of the way. And the balls stop hitting, and they disappear entirely. So this is where Lord Buddha is going to tell us, as to what happens after the disenchantment. And becoming thus disenchanted, he experiences their fading away as in the aggregates, fading away which is dispassion, as he becomes dispassionate towards them. This is viraga, where you're no longer passionate towards them. These things lose their luster for you. You're no longer buying what they're saying, what they're selling. And as his passion this passion grows and intensifies, he experiences release. Now, when it is thus released and liberated, there dawns in him, and for the first time ever, the very knowing it is indeed released. And at that instant, the noble disciple knows for himself, with certainty unparalleled, and through his higher and direct understanding, birth is finally destroyed. The holy life has now been fully lived, and its true goal finally achieved. Now there is no more coming back for me to any state of becoming. This is what the Blessed One said. Then, having uttered these words, the Sugata, the great teacher, continued by adding these verses. Looking upon form as if it were a bulge of foam, while witnessing feeling as none other than water bubbles appearing here and bursting there. Meanwhile, perception is seen as no more than shimmering mirage, whereas habitual drives are discovered to be as hollow as a plantain trunk, and consciousness as the trick produced by the magician's sleight of hand. Now all this has been explained by the kinsman of the sun. That's a reference to Lord Buddha. In this manner, again and again, one goes on to ponder these, carefully investigating them one by one, as each of them reveals itself to be completely hollow and void of any substance, despite their seemingly convincing appearance, as one continues to look closely at their point of origin. In this case, the reference is being made to yoniso manasikara, the wise, radical attention. Radical because you're going to the root. meaning contact, where the contact is happening. Instead of being driven to the la-la land of story making, which is the mastery of sannyas. That's its territory, from where we get also papanchas, by the way, the proliferation of concepts and ideas that never stop. Papanchas will never come and say, you know what, I think we've had enough. We'll stop here. Never. Never. They will keep on adding more and more momentum, which in turn will produce more sankharas. That's why an arahant does not produce more sankharas. Don't have one anymore. Why? Because they have seen through all these games that the mind is used to going through. Starting with this physical body, the possessor of boundless wisdom has taught how the moment three things are no longer present within it, this form itself then gets to be discarded and thrown aside. This form, as in now, is talking about the physical body. Thus, when strength, inner heat, and consciousness have all left and are no more found within this physical body, then, no matter its past, this body is unavoidably cast aside and left behind, becoming sustenance for all those beings that see it as nothing more than food. So it doesn't care if you're the King of England, your neighbor, the homeless person down the street, the pet dog, your boss, your wife, your husband, how many lovely memories you've had. It does not matter. Once the strength, inner heat, and consciousness have left, even the most loving individuals in your life will look away from you as you lie down there in the casket or on the funeral pyre. They will get rid of you. Well, wait a minute. Well, 5 minutes ago we were fine. We had 70, 80 wonderful years together. What happened? Anicca happened, and it's always been happening. Despite our views, despite our concepts, our perceptions, our albums of memories upon memories, all that gone. Recently, I was mentioning to a student when she was talking about parents. I said, which parents are you talking about? The ones that you recall from this life, or the incalculable ones, the ones that you cannot number, you cannot put a number on how many they were, whose faces you don't remember. You don't remember what their favorite food was or how they looked. None of them you recall. Similarly, with the body, this body. So you see, it's so precarious, it's so circumstantial, empty, hollow. Lord Buddha continues, but such is this aimlessly continuous cycle, this illusion that keeps on rolling while captivating the drooling fools. And for this reason, it should be seen as one's own secret assassin. Because here, there is no essence, no substance at all to be found. Here, you can almost see that he's pointing to the body. There is no essence to be found. In just this manner, the bhikkhu with strong resolution and energy must strive on, relentlessly probing and looking closely at each of these aggregates, whether by day or by night, and every moment in between, staying ever present with his full awareness and pervasive mindfulness. And by discarding all manner of identifications, he will slip off from all his shackles. They will come off, turning himself into the ultimate refuge of true safety indeed. But this can only take place when he lives with urgency, as if his head were ablaze. Your hair's on fire, your beard's on fire, your clothing's on fire, Do you have the luxury of postponing anything? That's the level of urgency that's necessary. By constantly motivating himself and endeavoring against all odds, unwavering in his determination as he continues, unafraid towards the unshakable. Sad. Powerful sutta. And I love the imagery because we are more so than rational. I think we've all begun in the past with a special relationship with imagery. And that part of the brain is always there. It's always active. It has a precedence, supremacy, I would say, on even the rational mind, no matter how rational we think of ourselves to be. Images. And Lord Buddha realized this. And that's why he kept on using countless metaphors and similes, because as the saying goes in English, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Not just a picture, but a scene. The one that comes to mind right now is when the jackal or the fox is trying to attack the tortoise. And the tortoise, which one was that? Pheṇapiṇḍūpama Sutta, which a few years ago I covered it, where Lord Buddha is giving the example of a person pulling in, just like the tortoise pulls in all its limbs and head into its safety of its shell. When the fox or the jackal comes trying to bite and nibble on its legs and limbs, it can't. Lord Buddha's example here is in reference to the 6 sense doors. What a powerful image. So you might not remember the sutta name. You might not remember where it's from. You might not remember the whatever that said it, the scene and the context, but you will remember the relationship with the jackal coming at the tortoise, trying to eat it. And after several hours of trying in vain to kill this animal, this tortoise, it goes away. Angry, upset. So similes are very powerful, and they stay with us a lot longer than just mere phrases or words even. So I will pause here and see if there are any questions or comments. My neck is not feeling well, so that's why I have this. Otherwise, I wouldn't wear this for viewers, in case some might be wondering. Let me see again. If you have any questions, you can ask later, emailing it to me. So let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mambaranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May your effort in being present to this sutta, listening, paying attention to the words, and gaining as much as you can now and even later, especially. May all the efforts and especially the rewards from that effort be shared with the devas, the nagas, all beings, especially the petas, who are at the most receptive mode of all beings within the 31 layers of existence. They are the ones who are most in need and able to benefit, as Lord Buddha says. in the Janusoni Sutta from the Book of the Tens. So may you continue on your practice on this path, and you have so much power, so much. The wheel, the steering wheel is in your hands, no one else's. So the image of burning, the hair of one's, the head burning, the head that's ablaze, may it muster up, may it bring up, inculcate, encourage within you, inspire you to have more and more Samvega every day, every moment. And if you catch yourself not having had sati throughout most of the day, or an hour, or this and that, please go easy on yourself. That's the worst thing you could do, to punish yourself by creating more remorse, because remorse will create agitation. It's not going to help at all. See, okay, I didn't have enough sati, I'm going to have it now. That's it. Add drop by drop, Lord Buddha says. Please don't be discouraged. Soon the bucket will get full. So, and you will see the results of that, as well as those around you. And panya will grow as well. So with that, may you be well. May the Triple Gems blessings be with you all and your loved ones. Until next time. Sukhi Hot.